Okay, good morning. My name is Steve, and I'm here today to talk about Orchard and JavaScript frameworks. Just a quick show of hands, who is actively using sort of MVC-style JavaScript frameworks today? Wow, about just over 50%. It's pretty good, pretty good. I just want to sort of look at how we got here today. And if you, for the older ones of us, will remember that back in sort of the early 1990s to mid, the web was a simple place. Web pages were simple, plain old HTML normally, a single request, single response. So you click on a link and you send a request to the server would bring back some HTML, and that happened all synchronously. And then in '96, the Internet Explorer team introduced the iframe, which enabled content essentially to be loaded asynchronously for the first time. Before that, we sort of had standard frames, and there was some hacky ways of sort of using standard frames by making them zero heights and things like that, but it wasn't very nice at all. And the iframe is actually still being used extensively today. YouTube and Facebook favour it over sort of JSON-P and things like that. In '98, the Outlook Web Access team introduced the XML HTTP request object in the form of an ActiveX component. And that truly did allow asynchronous communication sort of out of bounds with the server, something we actually take for granted today. It was actually designed around XML. There was a SOAP sort of HTML component that allowed you to pass SOAP requests, but because it was an ActiveX component, it didn't actually work in Netscape, for those who remember Netscape. So there was actually an alternative method using a Java applet within the page called remote scripting. And for anyone that's actually done that, it was horrible. And in 2001, Douglas Crockford introduced JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. And this allowed the communication between the client and the server to be greatly reduced in terms of the payload. XML is verbose and obviously very heavy with all the tags it has. So JSON was a welcome introducement there. Also, obviously, the job that the JSON actually worked really well with client-side JavaScript. So in terms of the parsing and interacting with that, it was a lot better too. And then in 2004, Google implemented a cross-browser implementation of the XML HTTP request in their product Gmail. And then in 2005, the term Ajax was coined by Jesse James Garrett. And the term SPA was also coined by Steve Yen. Now, SPA stands for Single Page Application, and that's actually being widely used today to describe websites that actually don't refresh and load content asynchronously. So Ajax is not to get confused with the football team, or Ajax, or the cleaning product, as you can see by the logo behind me. And then in 2006, which is probably around 7 years ago now, jQuery version 1 was released, and that actually made cross-browser Ajax requesting sort of a lot easier, and something that we all do today. And I just want to give you a quick demonstration on how one would go about doing that. Does anyone know what this is a screenshot of? It's Back to the Future 2 game. Does anyone know the platform? I'll buy them a pint if you can guess. Correct. Atari 2600. We have a vanilla Orchard install here, and you can see that we have a few pages with some content on. And every time we do a request, you can see here by Chrome tools that the whole page gets loaded in along with all the CSS and JavaScript. So you can see here we have no JavaScript, but just the CSS. Now, if we wanted to bring that into a single page environment, I'm just going to find the layout file for the theme, And again, this is something I wouldn't suggest you guys do, but for demo purposes, I'm just going to stick it in the bottom here. So, first of all, I'm including jQuery library and hooking into the main primary navigation here and for looking for the click event. So anyone clicking on these links, I'll capture. I then prevent the default action and then call the load content function, passing in the actual href for that page. Not sure you can see that well. So the load content function, we get the content div on the page, and then we call the jQuery load function, passing in the href from the link. We also then pass that content and look for the content zone, and then we also trigger an event to say, when that content is loaded, we fire an event off. We also then just update the CSS to set the navigation, so it seems that the page has been selected. On top of that, we then listen for that event, and when that happens, we set the page title, and we also add in the history support using the HTML5 history API. And this is something that allows the URLs to be nicely formatted for us. It's not fully supported across all browsers, but a lot of the major ones now support it. And then finally, what we need to do is just listen to the pop state, which is when someone clicks back and forth on the browser, and then again reload that content. So I'm just going to refresh that. And then now what you'll see is when we click page 2, only the page loads and not the CSS or the JavaScript. And then we click on page 3 and likewise. And you can see from the URL across the top, we actually have these nice URLs. And also if we click back, we have full history support. Now the best thing about this is it's actually SEO friendly because these pages actually also exist on this endpoint. So if I was just to refresh this and not click on it, that page is still accessible to search engines. Obviously it loads all of that page in. So that's one way we can do it today. So the problem is with that is that obviously that can get extremely messy pretty quick. If you've got a lot of pages on your site, it's not a nice way to do it. You're going to quickly get a lot of spaghetti code, and that's where MVC frameworks come in, or rather MV Star. And the reason we call it MV Star is that a lot of the popular libraries out there today don't class themselves as MVC. Some do, but some are MVP, some are MVVM, and some don't even want to categorize themselves at all as that. But what it does do is it gives you all a structure around the code. It makes it easily testable, and the URL separates the views and the models. And that's a key common feature. So looking at the top players today, we can see I've just listed 8 here, but in brackets you'll see the GitHub followers as a sort of a crude influence statistics. And within here you'll see that there's a mixture between frameworks and libraries. Now you might be asking yourself, what is the difference between frameworks and libraries? Well, libraries are actually something that can slot into your existing architecture. So here are 4 of them that can do that at the top 8. And frameworks are something that is a little bit more of an out-of-the-box scenario. It gives you an inbuilt architecture and gives you a lot more of the feature set out of the box, whereas libraries tend to be a little bit more lightweight and you can use as little or as much as you wish. Frameworks tend to be very opinionated on how they work as well. and you have to follow their conventions. So pros and cons with each, and depending on what you require, or your preference even, you can choose which one you like. But you might be thinking, isn't this all a bit too familiar? Haven't we seen all this before? Who remembers these libraries? And I guess not many people are actually using them nowadays. And also, you know, SPAs, didn't we used to call them RIAs, or rich internet applications in the day? You know, why should we invest our time in these new frameworks when, you know, they could go away tomorrow like these guys? Well, JavaScript is huge, and it's getting bigger and bigger each day. It's by far the most popular language in the world, and used not just on the web, but within devices, within applications like Photoshop and things like that, or even within TVs. So you can see that this is a graph from GitHub showing that the programming language is stored on there. You can see that JavaScript is by far the most popular. So why the surge? Why this increase in activity? Why another set of frameworks? Well, it's mainly because, you know, we're in another browser war, and browsers come out every other day. You know, I think we're on Chrome 27, I think, at the moment. So, but with each new version, we actually get faster JavaScript engines, faster runtimes. So, you know, we can do a lot more with JavaScript in a nice and performant way. Tablets and smartphones are becoming more and more powerful. And there's also user expectations. You know, people want everything, and they want it fast, and they want it fluid. They want the latest and greatest, and they just expect it to work, unlike a hoverboard on water. Also, better browser support. Again, more and more browsers are out each and each day, and with that become more, you know, capability. So things like CORS, you know, cross-origin requests and things like that are coming into the forefront. We're allowed now to sort of take advantage of that and give the user a better experience. So you might be thinking, where does Orchard come into this? Sorry, Bertrand, on the picture. So who's using what in Orchard at the moment? The only thing I can find is the library that Sebastian has wrote, which is the new media library in Orchard 1.7, and this uses Knockout.js. There is some modules in the gallery for Knockout and Angular that I can see, but they actually just bring in the scripts into your library. So, you know, something pretty basic there. And probably the reason for this is that until recently, it was really difficult to get that data out of Orchard into a nice format like JSON or XML. Thanks to Nicholas, we now have the Web API support in 1.6. And we also have a module from Raisin Studio called the Content Types API, which essentially exposes the content items that you have as JSON or XML. So I sat down and had a look at the opportunity here and looked at what I could do. And my preference is Backbone. So I chose Backbone due to its flexibility, it's lightweight, it's only about 6K in size. It was created by the same guy that did CoffeeScript and Underscore.js. It's probably one of the first ones out on the market. It's got a great community, a lot of plugins, and it's not opinionated whatsoever. You can use it as little or as much as you want, and you can expand it quite easily. Some of the people that are using Backbone, we've got Khan Academy, Basecamp, Airbnb, to name a few. And these are not just internal applications, these are public-facing websites that you can go on there and have a look, and if I have time, I'll sort of give you a quick demo of the Hulu site and how that works. And I want to give you a quick demo of Orchard.Backbone. This is something I'm working on. It's still early days, but I'd like to sort of give you a sneak peek and get feedback and potentially some help as well. So I'm just going to get rid of this from here, as that will interfere. And what we have is a cast page, and within the Orchard admin, I've installed a couple of modules. So we have the Raisin Studio Content API module. We have this Backbone sample, which is essentially just a way of demonstrating what I'm doing today. So that's just some bootstrap, some data. And then we have the Backbone module that I've created. Okay. So within here, we have this Backbone.sample page. At the moment, it's blank. So what we're going to do is expose some data that we have as through the web API and bring it through using the Backbone plugin. So first of all, I want to talk to you about the Orchard.Backbone module and how that works. So it's really easy. It's just essentially a JavaScript file. And within here, we have essentially a wrapper around content items and sort of the web API. So here we can see we have sort of the base URL that's linking to the Raisin Studio module. And it does a little bit of tidy up on that URL and passes in sort of the query strings as required. We also do a remapping of the ID attribute. And we also changed the Backbone sync functionality as well to work with that module. So when we're doing a create in terms of CRUD operations, it actually changes the URL for us. That's for the individual model, and we also have a collection of those here as well. Likewise, for custom sort of web API modules, we do exactly the same. We have a base URL. We remap the ID and essentially just expose that in a nice way. So to give you an example of that, I'm just going to bring up the sample. And within here, we have a act as admin controller, which essentially just outputs a plain view. We have a act as controller, which is a web API controller, which essentially just brings in a repository and outputs it as a list. And we also have one to get a specific actor if we need to. So we want to call that API within our admin. So within here, I have a simple view. And first of all, I create a table. So this is where we want the list of actors to be rendered. So at the moment, we just produce a table and we give it some column headers. On top of that, we create a model template. So this is the template that we use to essentially map the attributes of the JSON attributes to HTML. At the moment, it's using underscore templating, and this is the syntax that we use for that. But that is configurable. We can use handlebars, moustache type of syntax as well, or you can actually plug in your own templating engine. And all we do here is we list out the actors' names, and we just show the links, and within the links, just bring in the model ID on the links. So next, we create a model view. So this is the view that represents each item in the collection. So here we can see that each record will actually be a table row. We then map that using the template. So we pass this model template in, which is defined here. And we then render that into the element, which is the TR, as HTML. And we get the JSON for that model and bring it in. Next, we need to define the list or the collection view. So in this case, we're using the T-body. So this will actually be shown underneath here. So this is the collection of items. And all we do here is we iterate through the collection, doing a for each, and then call this add one method. And then here we create a new model view for each one of the models. And we can pass that model in. And that just creates a new one of these model views. And then we append it to the collection and render it out. So then we're our views. Now we need to obviously get the data. So this is where the Orchard.Backbone module comes in. So here we create a new a new instance of API items, and we pass in the endpoint for our actors, which is the web API. We then call fetch on that, which essentially goes and does an asynchronous call to the server to get that JSON. And when done, we do this callback method to essentially create a new collection view, which is this one here, pass in the actors, and then render it to the page. And it's as simple as that. So essentially, this is the important bit that I want to show today. This is obviously standard Backbone things here, creating views. Here, we're actually calling and getting the data from Orchard and representing it in a JavaScript way. So if I refresh, and there you can see that we have our list of actors shown in the admin, and each one of these links through to passing in the ID of that actor. Obviously this isn't hooked up, but you can see that that would be easily shown. So what we want to do now is actually bring that into the front end. So we have our cast. So it's very similar code to what you've just seen. So I'll sort of go through it quite quickly. So we first bring in some styles just to make the page look a bit better, but in this case we're not using a table, we're using a list. And then we create our model template, and you can see here we're doing a little bit of string manipulation. So we've got a picture this time, and we're showing the actor's name and the character name. And then we create our model view, but in this case, rather than a TR, we're using a list item. We take in the model template as before and rendering that JSON into that template. And then we create our collection view like we did before, but this time we're specifying that it's an existing element, which is the list item, and that's shown here. And then we again iterating through each of the models and rendering each of the models out. Same as code before, we pull in the actor's information and we render it on the page. So the only difference between this and the admin is it's a different template essentially. So if we just refresh this page, we can now see that we're using the same data, essentially the same code, but a different template. Now I could have abstracted some of that code away, but essentially it's the same principle, is that we're reusing that data in different ways, in different formats. So this can be also done with the content types. So we have in the admin a speaker type, and you can see we have all the speakers here today within here. And just a bit of a bio, a title, and a glorious image. So obviously this is where the Raisin Studio API comes in, and I'm just using Postman as a little bit of a tool here to show you the JSON that gets returned. So you can see here we have the ID, the title, the body. We also have fields, and in that fields we have the image, and that's for all of the speakers. So we need to get that information and stick it on the page. So I've created just a simple view here in speakers, and we do exactly the same as we've done before. Same boilerplate code. We include the Orchard.Backbone module, a few styles to make it look pretty. We also have an unordered list. We create our model template. This shows us how we want the information to be rendered and displayed. We create our model view, which is a list item. We do our standard template in. The only difference here we've got here is we're actually looking for the change event. So when the model changes, it actually re-renders itself automatically. So that way you can, essentially bind on those changes and change it over there, and it will automatically update for you. And we call, this time, the content items of the Orchard.Backbone and pass in the content type, in this case speaker. We then do a fetch, and when that's done bringing the stuff back, we create our view and pass in the collection. So, clicking on the speakers tab. So now you can see we have our speakers displayed in all their glory. So what we can do is obviously create a new speaker. So give Doc Brown his own speaking gig. And then choose an image. Publish. And then we can refresh this page, and we can see the doc is our special guest. So with this, we can actually make some changes. So we can see here we've got Doc Brown. So I don't know if you can see this, but here we just get in the speakers collection, and we're specifying the number. So number 12, there's obviously 13 speakers, so it's a 0 index. And we're actually just updating the title here. And as you see, when I press enter here, you'll see that Doc Brown here will actually change. And that's automatically, just because I've changed that model, the view is automatically rendered automatically for us. We can also do the same with delete and create and things like that. So here we're just deleting Doc Brown. I just want to show you actually, if I just refresh, you'll see that Doc Brown has also changed here in the admin. So if I then go and destroy or delete the doc and refresh, you can see now he's disappeared. And if I go into here, you'll see he's gone too. So obviously that is something that's a little bit basic, but just wanted to show you sort of the core principles. Obviously with such a framework you can do a lot more. Going back to the slides. So obviously it's still early stages for this module. So what does the future hold? Well, I'd like to optimize the API. At the moment I'm using the Raisin Studio API, which I've had to make a few amends to, but I'd like to sort of have a little bit more of a custom API, a wrapper around things, just to make it a little bit easier to do some of the custom and common functionality that you'd expect. And abstract some of the things away, things like pagination, sorting, filtering, animation, transitions and things like that. So all the common things that you want to do in Orchard, it's really simple, but obviously give you the hooks to overwrite and to change and do things if you wish to. Looking at what else is about, I'm currently working on quite a large project on Drupal, and during the planning phase I looked into their next version, which is version 8, which is out later this year. And the community have taken the initiative and the decision to actually introduce Backbone at the core of Drupal. And that's for things like the inline editing or in-page editing. They're also promoting their web services modules to core as well and making that fully RESTful. And they're also getting away from PHP templates and bringing in a Twig templating engine, which is interesting because there's also a Twig.js implementation. So potentially, or theoretically, we could reuse the server templates and the client templates because it's the same syntax using the double curly braces. finally, I just want to talk about Orchard in general and what makes it so great. Now, I've used a lot of .NET CMSs in my time. I mean, a lot. And by far the best is Orchard. It's obviously in its infancy. We're only at 1.7. But I believe, version 2 will be a big milestone. And will be a real big contender for the other guys. We live in a multi-device, multi-channel world, and Beatrice was talking about that earlier. And I think content management systems are changing. I think they're not for websites anymore. Websites is just one part of the puzzle. We have mobile phones, we have TV applications, we have tablets, you name it. We need to get to this data, we need to expose it in different ways. So having an API, RESTful API at its core, I think is going to be a great asset to Orchard, and hopefully as a community we can do that. I've just put some references here for later when you look at the slides, and thank you very much.
Anybody have any questions for Steve?
Could we go back to the code for a moment? Because there was this part where you say Orchard.content template in the Backbone code, and I was wondering where that comes from. Where do you define that? How does that look?
So within the Backbone module here, we have this is essentially the starting of the Backbone module, and you can see here we have you can see that, yeah. So in here we have the collection, which is the content items. So when you actually call from the view, we're actually calling this here. So this exposes two objects, the content item itself, which represents the model. So that's each individual record. And we also have the content items, which is the collection of those models. So, all right, okay. I was a bit quick. Yeah, so just to quickly go over that, within the sample, if we look at one of the views, let's take speakers for instance, when we call to get that data, we just create a new instance of that object and we pass in the content type that we want to bring back, and essentially that gets then populated into this variable here as a set of Backbone models. Which is really the core of your module? Yes, at the moment. The plan is to obviously grow this module into something that can actually become a little bit more useful. So, as I say, the pagination things, maybe infinite scrolling, client and server mode. So if you wanted to filter in on the client as opposed to on the server, things like that, I think there's a lot of room for scope.
Anyone else?
Yeah, these all look nice from a user's perspective, but do you see some of the framework stuff provided by Orchard, like some of the services that developers use, not fitting in with such an approach? One thing that comes to mind is the iNotifier service, where you show a little message box, which I think requires a full page postback, or some of the features around alternates and providing alternates where you swap out the current shape that's being used. So in my thinking, such things won't fit with an approach like this. Is this true? What's your experience?
Yeah, so generally you're correct. I think if you look at all the CMSs out there on the market, they all have the same problem. They all haven't embraced this type of technology to date, and I think it will be a great differentiator if we can. But to answer your immediate question is, by design, the CMSs are server generated in terms of the server code that brings back. So this paradigm is a little bit square peg around hole, shall we say. So I think some of the things like you mentioned, like the notification service, that could easily be changed to work with this. For example, Backbone also has a sync module that allows real-time communications through SignalR. So potentially, I know there's a SignalR module out in the gallery, potentially we can update the notification to actually use real-time and bring that through. But it does require, again, a lot of the modules would require updating to fully embrace something like this. At the moment, this is seen as a workaround to sort of get some of this, this functionality into Orchard.
Anyone else have a question?
How can you make such dynamically generated lists or pieces of content search engine friendly? So it's also accessible without JavaScript.
Okay, so with most of the libraries we have, especially in Backbone, we have like a router object. So this listens to the URL and is able to act upon the URL. So like the first demonstration where I used jQuery to use the push state, you essentially have a static page as well. So you'd have a fallback page. So in fact, I'll give you a quick demo of if I just bring up the Hulu site as an example. So this is the TV section of Hulu, and as you can see, we have a list of all of the shows, and you can see this is loading in asynchronously as like an infinite scroll. But on top of this, you can see we have the URL TV new shows. If I then click on episodes, that refreshes that list, rebinds new data to that list, but also updates the URL, and we can do the same with clips. Now, if I just refresh that and visit that on its own, that page still exists as a single page. So you can still have the richness of asynchronous content, but also have a fallback page for SEO and accessibility perspective. The search engine will visit this page as it would do normally, because it is an actual page, but it's defaulting to that list. So the rendering is only done based on user actions here, so it's progressive enhancement. So these pages actually can get rendered server-side as well. If you just visit the page directly, if I just click, if I was just to take that and open up a new window and paste that one in direct, it would be rendered by the server, but it's actually rendering just that list. Sorry? Anything in particular? So if I show you the network, if I just reload that page, you can see here that it's downloading everything and anything. And then if I clear that and only show, it's actually got loads of ads. But if I just show that, you'll see that all of this ad content here, but it's only the page that actually gets rendered.
I think the question was, they're still rendering using JavaScript, there's no static HTML. That's the impression.
No, it only based on user action. So the page exists as a server-side page as well. So if you visit that using a screen reader or a search engine, it'll render from the server. You only enhance the experience with JavaScript. So you don't do a synchronous request, you actually do the asynchronous loading. Potentially you can do a lot more with it. Obviously this is a simple example, but potentially you can do things like drag and drop, updates in the background, things like that. And Trello is a good example of that. So it is perfectly SEOable, there is a little bit of extra work that you need to do, and I think that's where the sharing of the templates come in. If we can have server-side templates in the same syntax as client-side templates, then potentially we gain in that, that maintenance perspective.
Anyone else? Great. Oh, actually, two more.
And why you choose Bootstrap with AngularJS? Why choose Bootstrap and not AngularJS?
Backbone.
Backbone, yes. Sorry.
It's a personal favourite of mine. It's something that I've looked at Knockout and I looked at Angular, and Angular is good. It's not fully supported across all browsers. I think it's got partial support for IE7, but it's very opinionated. Angular is. I wasn't keen on, confined to their sort of regulations and their laws. I wanted a little bit more flexibility. That's why I didn't choose that one. Knockout, I just can't get on with Knockout. Even though I've had lots of experience with Silverlight and MVVM, I just couldn't get my head around it. I used it a few times, and it's a different way of thinking. And some libraries are just a preference thing. Some are better at doing certain things than others. I felt Backbone gave me the flexibility that allowed me to add on top of it if I needed to, or use just as little as much as I like. And plus, it's around about 800 lines of code, so it's actually something you can actually read yourself and understand. It's not nothing complicated at all. Those are the main reasons.
Last question?
But just to end on that, I'm not saying you can only use Backbone. I think having Orchard as a platform, I think we should have multiple options.
There was one more hand there.
Hi. That was actually almost the answer to my question, is that if you look at Drupal and they're going to take Backbone as into their core, that will probably limit other options to some respect to the rest of the developers. What do you think about persisting like the choice for Backbone as a module, allowing other teams to inject modules with other frameworks in Orchard? That would be a benefit maybe to our framework compared to the Drupal that makes the decision to the core. What do you think about those kind of decisions for the core of the framework?
Yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of discussions to had with the community on that. I do feel that there could be certain hooks, especially the notification API and things like that we can hook into, and that could be framework agnostic. And Drupal does that as well. But yeah, I don't want to force Backbone down anyone's throat, and I don't think that would be the right thing to do. I think as a platform, it needs to be flexible and to allow multiple. And I think if it's architected correctly, it could do that. So having a Orchard.Angular or an Orchard.Spine, then I think that's fine.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.